Some people think a stroke affects the heart. Others think a stroke only happens to older people. Well, the fact is that a stroke can happen to anyone. And to put it simply, when a stroke attacks the brain, blood flow to it is suddenly interrupted, either by a blood clot that blocks a vessel in the brain, or a blood vessel in the brain bursts or leaks. And when it does happen, brain cells immediately start to die, up to 1.9 million brain cells every minute. So the faster it's treated, the better. Depending on which part of the brain a stroke attacks, its effects may be very different. It can affect speech, understanding and emotions, sensations and the ability to move parts of your body, or even paralysis, blurred vision or a blind spot in your field of vision. Even vital functions such as controlling your heart rate, swallowing and breathing can be affected. We represent the many facets of stroke and those it touches. Stroke is one of Australia's biggest killers and a leading cause of disability. The Stroke Foundation is here to change this by working to prevent, treat and beat stroke through research and innovative treatments, public awareness and support for stroke survivors.
So the motivation is in part about providing people with more opportunity to engage in activities that will help their recovery, but we also know that that combination of activities after stroke has the possibility of promoting brain plasticity, and brain plasticity is important for stroke recovery or recovery from any brain injury, because it refers to the ability of the brain to rewire, remould. So they come and they do half an hour of exercise, then they have a break and a morning tea and socialise with other people with stroke, and then they will go off into a room where they do movement to music or dance or visual art.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, that's very loud, isn't it? Sorry about that. Good morning. My name's Carol Duncan, a Newcastle City Councillor, and I'm really delighted to see so many familiar faces joining us at the stroke morning tea this morning. So if you want to grab yourself a quick cup of tea and some sweeties and grab a spot at a table, I'm sure that you're going to find this morning's morning tea really interesting and hopefully really encouraging. I do firstly want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the lands of the Awabakal and Worimi people, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge other Indigenous peoples joining us here today. I'd like to also acknowledge that the State Member for Newcastle, Tim Crackenthorpe, is joining us this morning as well. Tim, thank you so much for being here. And one of my council colleagues, there you are, Councillor Elizabeth Adamczyk is also joining us here today. I think Councillor Winnie Bartz is hopefully on her way. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and dear friends, I'm really honoured this morning to come and join you and in fact, filling in for the Lord Mayor who is unwell, but I know that this event means a lot to her and it means a lot to all of us in this room, including myself, and I'll explain more about that in just a moment. But it is my absolute privilege to welcome each and every one of you to the Stroke Day morning tea. I also want to acknowledge the Colcott family who were integral in helping the Lord Mayor to establish an annual event to bring awareness to stroke and stroke survivors. So to Barbara, Ruth and Mary Colcott, thank you so much for your advocacy. And I also want to acknowledge today our guest speakers from our event partner, HMRI, Hunter Medical Research Institute, another organisation that I'm very fond of and have been privileged to do a lot with over perhaps the last 15 years now. And to those guest speakers, thank you as well for taking time out of your very busy days to come and present today. On Boxing Day 2007, my family had just come home to Newcastle after spending a fabulous week of Christmas fun with my in-laws. It was my in-laws, but it was still fun. We had a great time. I know, got to make an in-law joke, right? And we'd been in Sydney for the week. It was fabulous. My mum had been staying with my older brother in Sydney as well, and she was just about ready for a change from hanging out with her stinky son to come and hang out with my family and get her laundry freshened up. So Boxing Day, we went and picked my mum up and we collected her to come back to Newcastle. My mum had actually spent the last decade caring for her own mother, my grandmother, who had had a stroke. And spent 2 years in Coffs Harbour Base Hospital before she died. My mum was then carer for her elderly disabled sister for around a decade. So mum had done a lot of work, and I know many of you in this room are carers as well, and you know what that load can be like. But my grandmother's death, as is so often the case, was a little bit of a blessing and a relief for my grandmother and also for my mum, who finally got to have her own life back. And so we picked her up, we took her home with us to our new house. Well, it was an old house, but it was new to us, on an acreage. My mum was a mad keen gardener and a fabulous organiser, so I always love having mum come and visit. The garden got sorted out and all the toys and shoes and things got organised and put away in places where they could go. My father says that horizontal surfaces are my enemy, and I think he might be right. I knew mum was absolutely going to love it. I knew she was going to have a work cut out for her because everywhere she had lived, mostly in public housing for the previous 20 years, she had become the gardener who had taken something very ordinary and made it something very beautiful. So we're at home, we're having a quick tour. We've been home maybe 20 minutes and her grandsons, my boys, who were just 4 and 5 at the time, they were delighting in showing Grandma the downstairs room with its own little bathroom, and that was going to be Grandma's room. I went to get all the holiday laundry unpacked, so I knew my mum needed some clean knickers and bras. And I started to load everything into the wash when I heard my youngest son say, "Grandma, wake up. Grandma, wake up." And that's when I found my mum, face down in her new room with her 2 tiny grandsons, begging her to wake up. My father, however, is a stroke survivor, and he's still fit and well to this day. And I know, thank you to one of the brilliant people at the John Hunter and HMRI who had a good look at his head a few years ago and said they found nothing. Well, they actually did. They found that my father had survived a stroke at some stage. So we're pretty chuffed that we still have him with us, and he's in pretty good condition. That's my grandmother, my mum, and my dad. Where are the researchers in the room? No pressure. Absolutely no pressure. Well, okay, maybe a little bit of pressure. But of course, you've all got those stories yourselves, and that's why you're here, because you've either lost, or you survived, or you care, or you're trying to help. And that's all the reason we really need to get together on this very special day. It is one of the nation's biggest killers, and it's a leading cause of disability in Australia. Kills more women than breast cancer and more men than prostate cancer. So it's vital that we get together to discuss the effects of stroke and raise awareness about treatment and prevention. In this room, we have survivors who've faced the daunting journey of stroke head-on, displaying an inspiring determination to reclaim their lives. And we also have those caregivers and those families whose unwavering support and love is what is the bedrock of recovery. And of course, the amazing healthcare professionals and advocates who work tirelessly to prevent, treat, and support those affected by stroke. If you look around this room, you will see only too well that stroke does not discriminate. It can touch the lives of anyone, regardless of age, gender, or background. And it's our shared responsibility to raise awareness, to promote prevention, and provide support to those affected. So this morning tea, all up though, is a positive thing. It's a gathering of people who've walked those shoes, who understand those stories, who've endured that loss and who are trying to amplify collective understanding and that drive for ongoing research, advocating for better healthcare, increased awareness, and the opportunities for us to enhance prevention and treatment. So while we enjoy all the sweeties in the room this morning, and they are pretty good, I have to say, thank you to the Lord Mayor for the sweeties, we do need to reflect on the strides made as a community in the fight against stroke, but we also need to acknowledge that there is still a lot of work to be done. But together we can build a community that not only supports those affected by stroke, but actively works to prevent this condition from casting its shadow on even more lives. So I'm delighted to represent the Lord Mayor here today, but I also very personally want to express my deepest gratitude to everyone who's joined the morning tea this morning, as well as all of you who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event possible. Your commitment to this cause is commendable, and it's through our collective efforts and our collective care and generosity that we can make a real difference. So thank you once again for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoy this morning's program, and I'll hand you over to Gillian Mason, who is going to be your MC for this morning. Thank you.
Hi. It feels very daunting being an MC after being introduced by one of Newcastle's most prominent MCs. Thank you, and such a supporter of research and everybody. Nat, if you would pop some slides on the screen. Look, it's wonderful to have so many of you here in person, and it's great to see that there's a couple of people already watching online. And if you're watching this later on, because the recording will be available forevermore on all the social media channels, welcome to you as well. That is going to be the presentation of Julie, who is a consumer research partner of ours. So could you swap it to the one that looks like HMRI slides? And hopefully I loaded them up on there. But in any case, I'm coming to you as Hunter Medical Research Institute's Consumer and Community Involvement Lead, which is, a long way of saying I have the pleasure of being kind of a professional connector of people. I would love you to come and let me know what we could be doing at HMRI to make things better for you, to make it, and this is the vision of the small team that I lead, is to make it incredibly easy for you to connect with research that's relevant and important to you. And make sure that we design research studies that actually work for you and that are focused on the things that you think are important. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this place on which we meet. It's a Wabakal and Worimi land, it always has been and always will be. Here in the museum, this place, Newcastle, is called Mulubinba. It's quite ridiculous that I didn't know that until a couple of years ago. I think it's necessary work that we all need to do to educate ourselves more on what's been happening, the culture, the science and the medicine that's been being practiced on these lands for over 65,000 years. And there's plenty of opportunities too in the museum to have a look at some exhibitions. Whoop, hang on. I don't know why the slides aren't progressing. Nat, could you just push my slide forward, please? I'm going to show you just a quick map that you can get at the front desk, which is called the Mulubinba map, and it shows you different places in the museum to find out a bit more about Awabakal and Worimi culture. If we can go to the next slide. I thought I'd also, we want to go back one. Talk about the secret ingredients to our success and some of the positive advancements that we've made in stroke research and community building in Newcastle. So this is the poster boy for this year's event, Noel Johnson. Are you here? No, of course he's not, just sitting at home on the couch probably, basking in fame. I saw Noel a couple of weekends ago at the Stroke Choir, which is a fabulous community of people. David and Zaina here at the front and Kimberly here are part of the Stroke Choir. There's an open invitation. There's many choirists here in the room. Noel's a part of the choir, and it is a group where you can come sing together. It doesn't matter whether or not you think you're a singer. But singing after stroke is a wonderful way to promote neuroplasticity, brain healing, and they just have a lot of fun from all reports. Just back to the topic at hand, Noel is one of the secret ingredients I figured out to our success. Can I have the next slide, please? So he's been with us for the long haul. So Nat, if I could go, yep, perfect. From 2016 at HMRI Open Day, his artwork was the theme for our booth. If we can go to the next slide, you can see when the Stroke Research Register was launched in 2017. He was one of the stars in the Newcastle Weekly. I had to sit next to him and bask in his greatness. Next slide, please. That was a few haircuts ago. Then he even starred in a local performance called My Mind's Eye, which was a wonderful project where a bunch of our VIPs got together, shared their stories and performed them in the form of a play to clinicians, researchers and other people a couple of different times. Starring again, go on to the next slide please, Nat. And then he even got us on ABC Compass. This show was the second highest rated Compass show for the whole year. I think it must have been because of Noel. Next slide, please. I know you're working double duty over there, Nat. Just recently, Paul McCartney concert got 33,000 people into the stadium. Noel was there. Might be a coincidence, maybe not. Next slide. Anyway, that's why we chose him to be the poster boy for this year's event. We can go on to the next slide. A bit more seriously, there are many, many things that you can do to prevent a stroke. So actually between 80 to 90% of strokes can be prevented, which is not to say if you've had a stroke that, you should have done more. If you've had one stroke, knowing all of this can absolutely reduce your risk of having a second one. And there still is the really real fact that between 10 to 20% of all strokes, we don't know why they happen. And with all of the knowledge that we have at the moment, we don't know how to prevent them. So we've got a whole lot of work to do and we're working really hard on it. But the quicker that you can get to hospital if you recognise the signs of a stroke, the better. So just so we get a bit of crowd participation, and if you're at home and you'd like to write into the comments on any of the social media platforms what the acronym for remembering the signs of a stroke are, that would be great. So what does this first one mean? Face. So if you notice that someone's face is drooping, there's a facial asymmetry, and this is not usual for them, that's a sign that a stroke could be happening. What's the next one? A for arm. Everyone here knows, which is fantastic. So if someone's arm isn't working, if they can't raise their arm above their head, it's a bit clumsy, that's a sign. What's the next one? Yep, speech. So if someone's speech suddenly becomes slurred, they're having trouble getting the right words out, something weird's going on, could be a sign of a stroke. And the fourth one stands for time, because the quicker you can get to a hospital, the quicker that life-saving and brain-saving treatments can be administered. So if we go on to the next, oh great, my clicker's working again. So every minute counts, because, and I've forgotten, Beata might know exactly how many brain cells die every second when you're having a stroke, but it's a lot. So every minute, 1.9 million per second. Sounds right. Thank you. It's a lot. And so I wanted to give you just a very brief update on what's happening here in Newcastle and across the Hunter New England region, because we know that there's had to be a whole lot of organising, a whole lot of different research looking at ways to make sure people get stroke treatments fast. I know in the past it hasn't been easy for everyone, but what I can tell you is that looking at all of the data across the Hunter New England region, between 2013 and 2019, they actually showed that there's been no difference in the way that emergency stroke care is administered on the weekends compared to during the week, which had otherwise been this international phenomenon, right? If maybe the top neurologists aren't at the hospital, that can be a problem. Not in the Hunter New England region on average when they've looked at the data over this time, which was before COVID. And during COVID, latest stats from last year was that on average, actually, if you live in a rural or a regional area of the Hunter New England region, you would get stroke treatment slightly quicker than someone who's close by to the hospital, because they've got things so well organised. So that's reassuring. The data shows that people are getting stroke treatments quicker in this area, much quicker than they were before. And at the moment, there's a new, quite exciting drug being tested in a clinical trial at the John Hunter Hospital that they're wondering whether or not it will work better than some of the clot-busting drugs. So that's a quick update on the emergency treatments. Could you go to the next slide, please, Nat? Just so briefly, I wanted to update you. Last year here, we heard from Joe Miller, an Aboriginal man who's been working with community in the Tamworth and Quirindi regions with Dr. Heidi Jansen, who's pictured in the middle on a Yarning After Stroke program. They're making great strides. So the program is been based off some work that happened in New Zealand, and it's all about taking a community-led and a person-led approach to giving people a chance to talk about what they're experiencing and connecting with treatments and recovery and information about their recovery that's important to them. I would love to talk to you in more detail about these things too when we stop after the presentations to have a conversation. Pop on to the next couple of slides. So I was speaking to Dave at choir a couple of weeks ago, and you were saying, please tell us what's happening in fatigue research. A couple of years ago, all the members of the Stroke Research Register, well, not all of them, but so many of you did a survey and let us know that fatigue was one of your top research priorities. This is something that's been echoed by people all over the world. And so, in fact, we've got local researchers working on international collaborations to forge a roadmap to accelerated fatigue research. And already their work's making a big impact. So Professor Coralie English, Dr. Dawn Simpson, Dr. Kirsten Coupland, and then Rachel Peake, Brenda Booth, and Ben Scholfhalt. They're our consumer research partners. So they're people who have had a stroke, who have been working with our research teams for several years, and they're involved in this international work. The good thing about this collaboration, as far as I'm concerned, there's many good things, is that all of their work is published online. It's easy to find. I can help you connect with it so that you're not waiting years and years. It's a little preview. I just wanted to show you the bit that I've been involved in. So could you play that video, James? Just video one. As I say, I'm a connector. So my role in bringing together this collaboration has been many things, but also bringing people together on online dance parties during COVID. Anyway, you're missing out on the wonderful sound and movement. If you can pop your breath, oh, here we go. We kept ourselves occupied and motivated and came together during COVID. If you could pop the slides back on, that's been my role in making sure everyone's supported and connected to do their work. Yes, so here are some of the collaborators on that important fatigue research work. I'm going to hop out of the way in just a second, but firstly, my huge, I want to express my gratitude to all of you for being here, for many of you being part of research studies. Often it is a big investment of time. Even if you're testing a treatment and you're getting a personal benefit, it's still emotional labor getting involved in these things. You're still investing a whole lot of effort, often on a volunteer basis, and we really couldn't do it without you. If anyone else wants to get involved, you can join the Stroke Research Register, and we send invitations to trials and updates. Hi, Ray, it's great to see you. And even if you haven't had a stroke, there's another research register that you can join as well. I'm going to pop information up onto the screen later on, because for now, I'd love to introduce you to our first speaker, who's going to talk about all sorts of medical treatments for stroke. Let me bring up my notes to introduce her. So Professor Beate Bjorek is a clinical academic pharmacist for the Hunter Medical Research Institute, Uni of Newcastle and Hunter New England Local Health District. She's based at John Hunter Hospital, and she's been working in community and hospital-based stroke care for nearly 30 years, exploring how medicines can be effectively used to prevent and treat stroke. She's going to give us an update on the current medications and also feed back to you what came out of the Australian post-stroke survey that many of you were involved in. Over to you.
Slides are up. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank the City of Newcastle, our councillors, and also the Museum of Newcastle for hosting us this morning. Really appreciate it. My pleasure today is to talk a little bit about medicines in stroke. Thanks for the introduction, Gillian. So my name is Beate. I am a clinical pharmacist. I do work with the Heart and Stroke Program for the HMRI, but I also work in collaboration and partnership with the University of Newcastle and the Hunter New England Local Health District based at John Hunter Hospital. Now, before I get into talking about some of the medicines in stroke practical issues, I'm also going to extend the HMRI's acknowledgement of the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are meeting today and the lands on which we conduct our research, so the Awabakal and Worimi peoples, and we extend our respect to the elders past, present and emerging. And on behalf of the HMRI, I'd also like to send out a big thank you to all of you, those of you who are here today, but also those of you who are online joining us this morning or perhaps listening to this recording later on. We really, really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to exchange information with us, essentially. So we're going to give you a little bit of information about medicines in stroke. We'd like to hear back from you about some of your experiences and some of your questions. Now, my mission is to talk about medicines in stroke today, but I will say up front, many of you will be taking medicines. It's not going to be possible in this next short while to talk about all the different types of medicines that are available to treat stroke and some of the advances. But we're very happy to talk to you as part of this morning tea, or for you to reach out to us. We're more than happy to give you as much information as we possibly can. What I've been asked to do today is talk a little bit about some of the key aspects around medicines use and some practical information, which will hopefully give you some confidence and some motivation to have those conversations with your health professionals and reach out to get some information, and perhaps also to encourage you to participate in some of the research studies that we undertake around medicines use. So with that, let me start off by flagging for you that medicines are really important in stroke care. We're talking about medicines use in the community this morning. I'm not going to talk about medicines in the emergency treatment of an acute stroke. We're talking about medicines in the community. And medicines are really important in two ways. The first way is to prevent a stroke, ideally to prevent a first-time stroke, And if you've had a first-time stroke, we're trying to really use those medicines to make sure you don't have a second or a third or a next-time stroke. So this is what I'm going to focus on this morning. The second reason medicines are important is for those people who have had a stroke and maybe experiencing some of the after effects of a stroke, we do use medications alongside other treatments to help manage those. So they play a really, really important role. Now, I'm going to focus on medicines to prevent stroke this morning, and I'm going to reiterate some of the key points that Gillian has flagged already in her presentation, that according to the World Stroke Organisation, the vast majority of strokes can be prevented. So it means that there's something we could have done perhaps to try and avoid those strokes, and medicines play a really key role in helping prevent those strokes. And the key to that is knowing what our risk factors are and matching the medications up to those. If you are technologically savvy, I've put in a QR code there to the World Stroke Organisation. On their website, they have lots of tools that you can use to look up different risk factors, assess your own risk of stroke if you'd like to, and read about how stroke risk factors can be managed. And the clicker has stopped. Next slide, please. Thank you. So before I go into talking about some of the key messages around medicines use in preventing stroke, I want to just make this point that for medications to work, we have to take those medications. We also know from our research, both locally here and globally, that only half of the people who are prescribed medications continue them over the long term. So that means half of the people who are at risk of stroke or maybe have already experienced a stroke for different reasons stop their medications. We know from our research that one of the most common reasons is that people just simply don't know how their medicines relate to their risk of stroke, what the medications are specifically intending to do, and then with that, perhaps sometimes say they don't actually feel any different after taking their medicines. And that's actually a good thing because you don't feel your risk factors happening in the background. Hopefully you don't feel your medication necessarily working either, but you should be able to see that when you have your blood tests and your checkups with the GP to see if your risk factors are under control. And that's what I'm going to focus on now. So remember, not taking those medicines will increase the risk of stroke. So that's the key message today. If you've been prescribed something, please take it. And if you have any questions or concerns or challenges around using medicines, please reach out to us. We're here to help and try and tailor that regimen for you. Okay, so let's try and deal with that question with a lot of people not fully understanding the connection between the medications and their stroke risk. So let me first of all start off by explaining what the medicines are intended to do at the big picture level. These medications that we have available are there to help control the heart and the blood vessels and the blood cells so that we can improve the circulation of the blood to the brain. That's what we really want to do, make sure our circulation to the brain is really, really healthy. And if we can get that circulation to the brain, it means we get the oxygen that the brain needs to survive and prevent those brain cells from dying. So remember that a stroke occurs when the circulation and the supply of oxygen to the brain is blocked. So all the medications we are using to prevent that are really about optimizing our circulation and oxygen supply. So let's talk a little bit about the circulation and then how that relates to some of the common risk factors. And many of you will have heard a lot about this already. So let's for a moment just think about ideally what we'd like in the normal circulation. So we have our normal blood vessel. We've got lots and lots of these pipes running through the body, supplying all the body's tissues and cells, including the brain as our engine room for everything that we do. We want our blood vessels to be nice and pliable and flexible and stretchy so that they can expand and close to regulate the blood circulation and be responsive to those times when we need more oxygen to the brain and to the body. Within those pipes, within those vessels, we have our fluid blood circulating through. Within that, we have the blood cells floating, and they're the ones that carry the oxygen around the body. So we're always trying to make sure that we stay healthy and well, really fit to maintain that circulation, fluid blood flow, really flexible and healthy blood vessels. But we also know that through aging, through lifestyle factors and sometimes other health conditions, that doesn't always work out, and there can be damage to the blood vessels and to the blood cells, and that's what causes some of these really common risk factors. So the ones I'm focusing on today are the ones that impact almost everybody in the population at some point. So they're the ones we'd really like everyone in the community to really think about and think about their health and fitness as we go through. So the first one, and the most common one, is high blood pressure, which we also refer to as hypertension. So too much tension in the blood vessels. If there's too much tension in the blood vessels, you will start to get narrowing of the blood vessel, which means you get less and less blood coming through those vessels and supplying the brain with the circulation and with the oxygen that it needs. Also, when there's too much blood pressure in those blood vessels, they can start to break up and tear a little bit because they're getting too stretched. And again, if you start getting tears in those blood vessels, you can start getting blood clots forming and plaques forming at those sites of injury in the vessels. So high blood pressure is the most common risk factor for stroke across the whole population. And as I said, most people in the population will be impacted by blood pressure at some point in their lives. The second risk factor is blood clots forming inside the blood vessels in the circulation. The technical name for blood clotting is thrombosis. And this is where, because of damage inside the blood vessels, the body tries to heal itself and repair itself. And the number one way it tries to do this is by forming clots to heal up those tears on the blood vessels, to try and regulate the circulation. And of course, if your blood clots form, they can block up the blood vessels and then stop the circulation from getting through to the brain cells. The third common risk factor is fatty deposits occurring within the blood vessels. We refer to these as plaques. And again, through diet and sometimes through other health conditions in the background, we can get fat building up inside our blood vessel linings. And when that starts to stick inside the blood vessels, it can do a couple of things. One is it can narrow the blood vessel, which means, again, there's less opportunity for the blood circulation to flow freely and supply oxygen to our brain cells. But the second thing is, when they stick to the blood vessels, it makes them stiffer and much more easy to break and tear. So fatty deposits are something we also want to avoid. So they're by far the three most common risk factors: high blood pressure, blood clots forming inside the vessels, and also fatty deposits. Now, some of you in this room are thinking, well, some of that does relate to me, or I can appreciate that and seen that in people that I know. There are also other causes of stroke that I will acknowledge here, but they won't be a major focus over the next few minutes. The first one I want to acknowledge is atrial fibrillation, or AF for short. This is what we call a cardiac arrhythmia, or an irregular heart rhythm. So when the heart pumps, it doesn't do that in a regular ordered fashion. It starts to kind of quiver a little bit, which means that the blood coming through the heart chambers doesn't push through as forcefully as we would like it to go. A lot of people describe this as having palpitations in the chest, or a funny pulse or butterfly feeling in the chest. It is quite common in the community. So it's a cause of stroke that we do look out for and try to screen as much as we can. Another cause of stroke are what we refer to as tangle and tears in the blood vessels. For different reasons, people may have changes in the structure of their blood vessels. They may be born with structural differences. There may be some other health conditions or traumas that may cause some changes in their blood vessels. And those kind of malformations can cause dissections, so a rupture in the lining inside the blood vessels, and other sorts of major tears. And then finally, I'd also like to acknowledge that there are genetic causes of stroke. There are conditions that can be inherited within families that can also really predispose to stroke and recurrent strokes. One of the common ones is CADASIL, which is caused by the Notch3 gene, a mutation that's carried through family lines. And here at the HMRI, we are doing a lot of work around CADASIL type strokes as well, to see how we can support people and find some treatments to address that. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the common causes of stroke and why we need to focus on those. Before I go into talking about some of the principles around using medicines for those, I just wanted to flag that it's really important to be aware of your stroke risk factors, and there are some tools and resources that we can use that will help us do those assessments. I would always encourage you to have a conversation with your health professional. They'll be able to sit down with you and identify for you those risk factors and talk through some of the options that are available to manage those. But if you are technologically savvy and you'd like to go online and explore some options yourself, I want to flag for you that there is something called a stroke riskometer available online that you can go and have a look at. It's an app. You can put in your information and it will help assess your risk of stroke and provide some information around that about management strategies. If you prefer the good old-fashioned paper version, which I'm a big fan of, you can also pick up from the Stroke Foundation some checklists that will also help mark off and help you identify what those risk factors are. If you don't have access to a printer, ask your health professional, your GP, your practice nurse, your pharmacist. They'll be able to print that off for you and take you through that process as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the key principles around using medicines for those stroke risk factors. So I'm going to start off with high blood pressure first. The goal of using medicines for high blood pressure is to really enable as much blood circulation to flow through those blood vessels without causing any pressure and causing damage to those vessels. We have lots and lots of different medication available these days, really effective medicines and safe medicines that can be used for this purpose. They all work differently, and I'm going to flag some of the ways these medicines work. The first one is that some of them are designed to open up the blood vessels, make them a little bit more elastic and flexible. That's called vasodilation. We have a range of medications for that, and if that's something that your health practitioner thinks is important in your situation, they will choose the medication that's best suited to you for that purpose. The second way these medications work is that they remove excess fluid or water from the blood circulation. So if there's less volume in those blood vessels, there's also less pressure and less damage caused to those vessels. Many of you might recognise those as the water pills or the fluid pills. They take out the water from the circulation. Unfortunately, one of the unwanted effects is perhaps peeing a little bit too much, but at least you know that the medication is working and doing its job. That's called diuresis. And the third way medications can reduce blood pressure is they can slow down the heart pumping. So allow the heart to pump more gently so you don't have that pressure of that circulation with each pump putting on that pressure and strain on the blood vessels. So 3 different main mechanisms that we have available for regulating blood pressure. A couple of points that I'll mention at this stage. For many people, a combination of medication is the most effective way to control your blood pressure. It's usually more effective to use 2 options that work in different ways at a lower dose to get your blood pressure under control and reduce any side effects than perhaps trying to push one medication up to its very highest dose. Okay, so if you are using more than one medication, that's a good strategy. I know a lot of people get anxious about taking too many medicines, but that's often quite deliberate in the case of managing hypertension or high blood pressure. The second thing to note here is that everyone will be on a different combination of medications. So your prescriber will look at how you're responding to medicines, what else is happening in the background in terms of your health history, other medications, and they will choose a combination that's been tailored for you. So everyone will be on a slightly different combination of treatments. Hopefully that makes sense. Next slide, please. Great. Oops, gone back. Okay, so the next risk factor I want to talk about are these fatty deposits, these plaques inside the blood vessels. We have, again, a range of medications, a lot of sophisticated medications over the last few years that can help control the fats, in other words, the lipids that are circulating. What's really important to recognise here is that we have different types of fat in our blood circulation. They're not all the same. So we have cholesterol, and even within cholesterol, we have 2 different types of cholesterol mainly. what we call the bad cholesterol, which we want to keep low, and the good cholesterol, which we want to keep high. And we also have a different type of fat called triglycerides, which we recognise as TG on your blood test results, and we want to keep those down. Now, in every individual, when we do a blood test, we have a look at all the different types of fats that are there in the circulation, and everyone will have a different profile. Some people may have too much of the bad cholesterol, not enough of the good cholesterol. Some people may just have a problem with triglycerides being too high. Again, when we choose medications, we actually look at that profile and choose the medication that is specific to the types of fat or lipid profile that comes through in your blood test result. So again, when you are discussing medications amongst other people, just be aware that the medication you might be using for managing cholesterol may be quite different to the next person. So we are choosing the right medicine for the right type of fat. And the third risk factor that I'm going to talk about is about blood clotting. And this is probably one of the more complex risk factors for us to manage. The first thing I want to say here is, just as we have different types of fats, there are also different types of clots that form inside the body. And this is a question I get asked all the time as a pharmacist. Why is, my friend or neighbour or relative taking this type of blood thinner and my doctor's put me on this type of blood thinner? Which one's the better one? Which one's the stronger one? Am I on the right thing? So hopefully this next explanation will demystify that a little bit. So we have different types of clots. The first type of clot that I'm going to talk about are what we call the platelet-based clots or platelet plugs. We have platelets in addition to red blood cells circulating in our blood. When the platelets detect that there's been a minor bleed or a tear inside the blood vessels, the platelets come together, they join together to form what we call a platelet plug, almost like a Band-Aid inside the blood vessels, and they will stick to the tissue, to the blood vessel wall to try and heal it and stop any bleeding. Those types of clots are more common in people that have really high blood pressure over a long period of time, when you start to get damage to those blood vessels, but also when you have those fatty plaques starting to form inside the blood vessels and you start to get that tearing and stiffness. So if you have high cholesterol or high triglycerides and you have high blood pressure as well, you're more likely to form these types of platelet-based clots that stick inside the vessel wall. And of course, over time, if they're not well controlled and managed, they'll just keep building up and building up until eventually they close up that blood vessel and the blood circulation stops. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. The other type of clots are what we call fibrin clots. So the body can also produce these fibrin strands. They're like fibres that can knit together and form a mesh. And these types of mesh clots are really, really strong. They tend to be really big clots. So they respond in situations when their body recognises there's a problem with the circulation and we need a bit more of a heavy-duty response. And that's usually where you have the circulation starts to pool for different reasons. Maybe you have been immobile, maybe not moving as much and the circulation is pooling. But this is also common in people who have that heart arrhythmia called atrial fibrillation, AF. Because what happens in AF is when the heart doesn't contract or pump as forcefully and regularly as it normally should, you get the pooling of the blood inside the heart, inside the chambers. And when that blood starts to pool, that's when these fibrin strands, these clots start to form. So when the clot is sitting in the heart, that's probably not so much of a problem, but eventually it will slip out from the heart, go into the blood vessels, and again, because these are big clots, they can very quickly block up a blood vessel and stop that circulation to the brain. So if you have AF as one of your risk factors, then you're more likely to form fibrin types of clots. So what does that matter to you? Well, it matters in the sense that we have different medications specifically for these different types of clots. So if you're more likely to have a platelet-based clot, we use antiplatelet medications for that. The most common one is aspirin. We use low doses of aspirin for that purpose. And for people who perhaps don't tolerate aspirin, maybe because of stomach issues, we have some alternative agents for that as well. If you are more likely to have fibrin clots, from AF, for example, we have what we call anticoagulant medications. That includes things like warfarin and some of the newer agents in recent years like dabigatran, rivaroxaban, apixaban. They have different brand names, of course, but they are specifically for those types of clots. So in general, we talk about all of them as being blood thinners. But of course, we all need different types of medications for the different types of clots. So if you're having those conversations with family and friends and colleagues and neighbours, don't compare. Just remember the one that you're on is specifically for you. Are we going for time? Okay, so okay. Okay. Perfect. Okay, I'm just checking the time because I can obviously talk about medicines for a long, long time, but happy to do that later on. So some key messages about using your medications in that case, having gone through some of those key risk factors. First of all, know what risk factors you have. Make sure that you are getting some of those common ones regularly checked up. You know, have an annual checkup at least with your health professional. Get your blood pressure, your fats, talk about the types of clots you're more likely to form. And remember, you may need more than one medicine for each of those risk factors. And that combination will be tailored for you and it will be different to others. Make sure you also know your medicines. If you're not quite sure, talk to your health professional, especially your pharmacist. They'll be able to get you a medicines list and provide you some medicines information sheets that they can sit down and talk to you about those. And again, remember, that information will be tailored specifically for you. The third thing, kind of where we started off a few minutes ago, is just remembering to take your medicines. That's really important because being prescribed medication, having it dispensed is one thing, but if you're having challenges with actually taking that medicine, it's not going to work the way it's intended. So a few points around that. If you have any questions or concerns or you're not sure, please reach out. Don't be shy about asking questions or asking why it's there, what you should be feeling, what's its purpose, how do I know that it's working? We're happy to answer those questions. And if there's something that doesn't work for you, we've got lots of different ways that we can try and change that medication regimen around to make it better for you. So tell us your concerns, ask for advice, but more importantly, don't stop taking your medications until you get advice first. Because stopping your blood pressure medication can mean your blood pressure can go skyrockets very quickly. If you stop your anti-clotting medications, your blood thinners, clots can form also very quickly. So you don't want to be in a situation that you've stopped your medications before you've had a conversation with your health professional and unfortunately you end up with a stroke event. We don't want that. And a final word of caution around information. It's really wonderful that we have access online these days to lots of information. Just have a look at where that information is coming from. We would always encourage you to look at websites like the Stroke Foundation and the Heart Foundation, where that information is evidence-based and it's provided in a practical way to help you with your medication management. So just take care with other things on Dr. Google. And just to finish up here, I just wanted to flag some resources that are available that not everybody is aware of that can help with identifying and managing their risk factors, particularly around medicines management. So the first one is the Heart Health Check Toolkit that's available on the Heart Foundation website, or again, you can ask your health professional for a copy of this. It will help you mark off some risk factors there in relation to heart and stroke health, but it also has a nice plan that can be mapped out to outline the different ways you can help to try and control those risk factors. The other service that some people are not familiar with is a home medicines review. This is a service that's free to you. It does require referral between a doctor and a pharmacist. You just need to talk to your doctor or pharmacist and they will initiate the steps for you. But this is where a pharmacist can visit you in your home. They'll have a really good chat in detail about your medicines, what you're using, but they will ask you about your preferences, any concerns, any challenges you may have with using the medicines, or just things that perhaps you simply don't like doing around your medications. They'll have a look at what your health history is, some of your recent test results, and then they will map out a plan that tries to provide the best medication plan according to your preferences, what your needs are, what your priorities are, and also for your health conditions. They write up a report which is sent to your GP, and they'll have a conversation about that, and then the GP will present those options to you. So then you can make a decision about any changes that are made there. So please reach out if you think that might be of use to you. Ask your doctor or ask your pharmacist about that. It's a really useful service. Of course, we have lots of information. We have medicines information sheets. You can get these online or ask for printouts. The Stroke Foundation has really wonderful fact sheets that will also assist you with that. And if those questions are not answered through those resources, remember to reach out to your health professional. You can access them through your visits, by phone, by email, and these days also through online consultations. So please don't be shy. That's exactly what we're all here for. If your health professional is not accessible or you'd like some second or third opinions, I'd like to flag for you that there's something called the Medicines Line. It's a free service to you. It's a telephone number that you can call, which is manned by pharmacists. They will be available to answer any questions you might have about any medicines or medicinal products that you may have or might be thinking about taking. And the Stroke Foundation has a couple of options for you as well. They have the stroke line, which you can call or email with any questions that you might have. There's a team of health professionals, pharmacists, and allied health that can address any sort of management in stroke. They also have the Enable Me online platform. It's free to join up and sign. If you join that platform, you can also post your questions, and they'll also be answered by other members of the stroke community who might be able to share their experience and tell you what worked for them so that you can get some additional information. And then finally, with all of those options, if you need help with communication, because maybe your vision or your hearing or your speech isn't as good as it was before stroke, or perhaps English is not your first language, please reach out and let your health professionals know. These days we have access to much more communication-friendly resources, and we can tailor the information to you. We also have access to free interpreter services by phone. So if English is not your first language, there are also supports available for that. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for your attention. I hope that's given you a few key messages to think about in looking after your own health or those of the people that you are providing care for, and also giving you the encouragement and confidence to reach out to your health professionals if you need support in any aspect of medicines use. So thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And look, Beata was also going to share some information, some feedback on the results of the Australian post-stroke survey. I'm going to invite her and also her off-sider, Patrick Clemenson, who is unfortunately unwell and unable to tag team with Beata today, to do a live on social media in a month or two when everyone's feeling better. So, and then we can send you a recording maybe to the Stroke Register mailing list too. I was hurrying you up mostly because we've got, you know, delicious food, and here we want to have conversations after the presentations, but also because the Auslan interpreting may need to stop at 11 o'clock. So if you are using Auslan interpreting and it stops and you want to hear more, please get in contact with us, because we can see what we can do to make sure you also can access the rest of the presentations. I'd love to introduce Julie Davey, and while she comes onto the screen, she's joining us from Wangaratta, Victoria. If any of you are feeling stiff and want to stand up and stretch, please do. Julie's going to talk to us for about 10 minutes. She's got a wealth of knowledge to share, but flagging that after this 10 minutes, the event is not over. You're allowed to leave. But what happens then is that we've got a couple of other health professionals in the room, some survivors of stroke. You know, call out the word Ray and you'll find one of our stroke survivor research partners who have worked with us for years, and other researchers available. So we want you to have conversations. They'll be in different parts of the room. Ask your questions. They can't give you personal health advice, but they can talk to you about what the science says and help you navigate to personal medical advice if you need it. Julie, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thanks, Gillian.
I will very briefly introduce you and then just get right out of the way and let you do what you do best. So Julie Davey has been a consumer research partner, we call it. That's the technical term for someone that's had a stroke who works together with researchers to make sure that the views and values and experiences, these lived experiences of having a stroke, are considered in the research. She survived multiple brainstem strokes in 2015, leaving her densely paralysed on the left side of her body, unable to walk or stand, speak or swallow. And she's now using her knowledge as a stroke survivor, but also as a former CEO of health services, to work with us, health professionals, researchers and organisations to improve services for survivors of stroke. She recently presented a paper at the the Stroke Society of Australasia conference. International people do come, but it's largely an Australasian conference. It was called I Rebound After Stroke, The Consumer Perspective. And her paper and presentation won the Best New Investigator Award. So that's not an award that's, cordoned off only for survivors of stroke. That's an award that was available to any new investigator, researcher, and she won that, which is an incredible honour. It's well deserved. I'm going to move out of your way, and I'd love you to speak for a whole 10 minutes if you've got that in you, and then we will thank everyone online and wrap up the online streaming part of the day.
Thanks, Gillian, for that lovely introduction. I was very proud to receive that award and quite dumbfounded, really. I'd like to talk today about the HMRI research project called I Rebound After Stroke, and tell you that I'm actually coming to you from rural Victoria, and you'll probably think, well, hang on, the researchers are in Newcastle. How does that work? And I'll tell you a little bit about that later. And as you know, I'm a stroke survivor. But first, I'd like to thank the organisers of today. It's a great chance to get together and receive lots of information, have lots of good discussions with everybody. And I'd also like to acknowledge the owners of the land on where we meet today. And the land where I'm coming from is and has always belonged to the Bapangarang people. It's actually quite a hard word for someone with some speech issues to say, but the Bapangarang people. So I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and I acknowledge the unbroken spiritual, cultural, scientific and political collection. Oops, sorry. I just need to share my slides with you, I'm afraid. They haven't been shared. Sorry about that. So I'll continue so I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I acknowledge the unbroken spiritual, cultural, scientific and political connection the Bapangarang people have had to this place for more than 200 generations. I'd also like to express regret at the indignities my family and ancestors has perpetrated during occupation of this land and the land of the Barkandi people. I'm actually having some difficulties getting the slide up. If you could help, that would be great. Okay, here we go. Thank you for that. A bit of a technical glitch. We had one of those last time that Gillian and I did a presentation around stroke fatigue, and we ended up both disappearing from the screen at one stage. But anyway, here we are again. So after that acknowledgement, I'd like to tell you today I'm presenting on behalf of of a group called the Consumer Advisory Group of the iRebound project. And the previous slide shows the members of that group. And we were co-researchers with the researchers from HMRI in this research project. So we actually had equal power, I guess, in influencing the outcomes of the research. And so I wanted to share with you our perceptions of the co-design process that resulted in the iRebound website. The aim of this research was to outline how authentic consumer engagement can happen, while also co-creating a website, which at the beginning was unnamed, but it became the iRebound After Stroke website. And I hope that you've all seen it. The website aims to help survivors of stroke to move more and eat well. I became involved in stroke research after being unable to return to my job as CEO of a primary health service after surviving stroke in 2015. I wanted to be able to help improve stroke care and services and support. And at the beginning, it wasn't easy to find opportunities. I'm sure that other people have experienced that too. But I started making links through joining the HMRI Stroke Register, joining in with the Genius Network on Facebook, and through following stroke conversations on Twitter. And it was through social media that I first met virtually Coralie English, and she invited me to come to a focus group in Melbourne. And it was at that point I realised that I would like to work with this person on projects, because I felt a genuine sense of I guess equality and legitimacy in her work. Meredith Burke, who many of you will know, another stroke survivor, and I were later invited to be co-chairs of a consumer advisory group for this HMRI research project. I want to tell you a little bit about the website itself, if you haven't seen it. So you can see here, this is the title page of the website, and it sits within the Enable Me website of the Stroke Foundation. So through their funding and support of the project, we have an ongoing presence on the Stroke Foundation website, and you can navigate directly there if you want to. And the website has three main sections. The first one is eating well, and basically that area of the website helps you to eat well in the Mediterranean style of eating, which is recommended as heart healthy and also brain healthy, in the sense that if you follow the Mediterranean diet or style of eating, you're much less likely to have a subsequent stroke. So the other part of the website is actually moving more, and so you can see here on the screen various people who you may or may not know who have contributed to videos, exercise videos, activity videos, and to actually show you how real people who've had a stroke keep more active in their life after stroke, which is very important in terms of actually preventing further strokes and just living well. And the final section is the hints and hacks section, and it has lots of ideas from stroke survivors, again, about different things after strokes, like travelling, or say dealing with relationships, regaining your sense of self. As we know, that's quite a big thing for stroke survivors, and just practical things like, you know, how to go about doing shopping in a way that doesn't make you very fatigued and so forth. So check it out. It's a really fabulous website. We're pretty proud of it. And I guess it was the product at the end of our research. But in terms of wanting to do the research, it was twofold. One was actually trying to get genuine consumer engagement as part of the research. So consumer input is recommended for all research projects and brings great benefits. And things like providing real-world feedback that can make research methods more effective, increasing engagement and promoting recruitment. We had amazing recruitment to this project because people knew that there was stroke survivors involved in it. And consumer input can also avoid traps associated with sort of discipline-based mental models, they're like that are held by researchers perhaps with a discipline background. And also it gives, for researchers, this is pretty important, it gives your research street cred with consumers and patients. And in many cases, people are engaged in research in a variety of ways. So either as, people might be consulted with or asked questions, but genuine consumer engagement takes commitment and time. And that was factored into the design of this research. So the iRebound website was developed as a partnership between the survivors of stroke, the Stroke Foundation, who were the funders, and the Hunter Medical Research Institute researchers. So survivors of stroke were equal partners in this commitment. So we called ourselves the Dream Team, I think, because one of the things that the ingredients to effective consumer engagement is developing relationship, and yes, it does take a village. You can see on the top row are the iRebound Consumer Advisory Group members. We're a sort of rebellious bunch, actually, pretty bolshy, but we all bring different skills to the process. And at the bottom, we've got the researchers and the staff involved from Stroke Foundation. And the other thing that our research really pointed to was that it needs a commitment to the key principles of integrated knowledge translation. And so we really feel that the iRebound After Stroke website is actually a genuine example of consumer partnership, one where we all felt very valued and our input was sought on a kind of granular level. So how did we achieve that research partnership? So we found that we worked together from the start, and each of the members of our group were invited to be actively involved in the project from the start. We got to decide how we would prefer to work. So instead of just the researchers saying to the consumers, we're going to bring you in for X number of focus groups or so forth, we actually got to decide how we would prefer to work as an advisory group, and we got to decide how we would work and communicate with the multi-agency project team, including representatives from the funding body and the Stroke Foundation. And we got to decide how we'd like to work with Coralie English's team, including PhD candidate Dina Pogranoi, who was the key researcher. So while the broad parameters of the project have been determined in the funding project proposal, our influence was very meaningful and authentic, which was really satisfying as lived experience partners. As stroke survivors who've been involved in research before our group, was delighted that our lived experience and life skills were valued at a granular level, and this encouraged our efforts. And also our involvement increased interest from stroke survivors everywhere. A testament to that is that I believe by now we've actually had 55,000 contacts with the website since November, so that's a pretty good start. The authentic partnerships between consumers and academics created environment was safe, collaborative, and maximised the use of previous research evidence. So I'd like to say to the researchers present that the chance of co-design partnerships succeeding is dependent on 5 key strategies. The first is to invite consumer partners to be involved in operationalising your objectives, finessing the framework of your research, and devising the co-design approach within the IKN framework. So it takes courage, but it's really worth it. And there are guides and help helpful information for researchers who want to go down this path. Tip 2 for researchers wanting to engage in a project as genuine as this one was respecting the process as much as the outcome. So devising the process together, supporting each partner's group's involvement, and being open to process improvements, checking the efficacy of what you're doing and checking back in with people individually and as a group. Resourcing the process with time, regular communication and varied communications and respect. We actually established a closed Facebook group for the consumer advisory group, and that was a very helpful way of us processing information or getting feedback and opinions in between meetings. For researchers, remember that the consumer partners bring more to the table than just their experience of disease or a health event. And I would encourage you all to mine the total expertise of stroke survivors that you work with. Our group had an enormous range of skills and talents that were brought to bear within the project. So recognizing consumers as whole human beings. None of us in the room who have been stroke survivors have actually are just stroke survivors, and recognize that skill and those aspects that people bring to the table. Above all, be real, be authentic, and willing to learn. Be willing to compromise, be willing to sit with uncertainty, be prepared to modify the details of your desired outcome if you realise it won't be fit for purpose. In a genuine partnership, we learn from each other. And adopt the concept of an alliance with consumers. We're all in this thing to make life better and to reduce the impact of stroke. So a key take-home message is that collaborative relationships between survivors of stroke and researchers are essential for achieving fit-for-purpose outcomes. Research that doesn't work this way may produce outcomes, but they may not be fit for purpose or real and valuable for stroke survivors. So I'd like to leave you with our conclusions there. We're actually pretty proud of the baby that we created, I have to say, and it's had great feedback and from people who have used it. And people who are stroke survivors can use it, people who are carers, family members, health professionals can use it to help people stay motivated to continue working a healthy lifestyle. So I'd just like to acknowledge that the poster and whatever of this project was presented at the conference in 2023 and is available if people want to see it. And then check out the website; it's really good. And Dina Pogranoy, who was the key researcher, should be congratulated for this piece of work, because her efforts at making this work for all participants was extraordinary. Thanks very much.
All right. And thank you so much, Julie. If you're online actually and would like to speak to Dina and also her colleague, Emily Ramage, they're going to jump into a Zoom meeting. Okay. Shortly, in a couple of minutes. Yep, surprise.
Oh, I meant to show off my T-shirt, if I could, Gillian.
Please do.
I'm wearing the iRebound online T-shirt. We were so proud of the project that we've had T-shirts printed. You go to the concert, you get the T-shirt. And so we're very proud of being the iRebound consumer partners.
No, look, thank you so much for coming in and sharing time with us. I think, again, we should have another separate online event where you could talk to Julie about what it's like to get involved. So you can get involved in research as someone who just wants to dip your toe in. Like, completing a survey is hugely valuable. Donating $5, hugely valuable. That's a contribution. right through to having a look and seeing whether there's a 3-month-long or a year-long research study that you might like to take part in. There's so many different ways to contribute. And then for those of you who want to be more involved and want to drive the research and lead research together with the researchers, please get in touch, because we're looking at new ways to support that, to do that much more often. This example of genuinely co-designed research has been a wonderful one, and we're looking for other ways to make sure that that's a normal experience. So for everyone online, in the chat, in the comments, there's been a Zoom link posted if you want to talk to Dina and Emily. And we'll say goodbye to you now. And everyone in the room, before you do anything, could those of you who are researchers, clinicians, who would like to be the hosts for conversations, just stand up? We've got Rachel Peake and Ray Gray, Carly standing over at the door, Nell and Diana? I don't know why. Mental blank going on here. All right, so they're willing to have a chat. Those of you online, I hope you've had time enough to click on the link to enter the Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so very much to the City of Newcastle and the Lord Mayor's Office again for supporting this event. With their support, it means we don't have to spend research funds on bringing an event like this together, which means we can invest it directly into working on better outcomes, helping, produce research that is there to make sure that survivors of stroke live their best lives and that less people have to experience stroke at all. So bye everyone online, and we'll see you next time. Producer Nat, if you could click the stop the live stream button, this will be a lovely way to end the